In this video, let's have an overview of program flow. A program flow refers to the sequence of execution of instructions in a program. Say for example, you have written a program and it has a few lines of code. Now, how do you define the sequence in which these set of instructions need to execute? How does the compiler or interpreter know in what order they need to get executed? This specific sequence is referred to as a program flow. Let me explain this program flow with a simple diagram. Consider this set of codes having a few blocks. We have say block 1, block 3 and say block 2. Each block refers to set of instructions. Now how do you make sure that this block gets executed first and then the second block and then the third block? What makes your program to execute in this specific order and not the order like 1, 3 and 2? So this refers is as the program flow. So you have to tell the compiler or interpreter that you have to execute 1 first, then 2, then 3. Now if you compare this version, now here we have clearly defined that block 1 is the first, followed by the block 2 and followed by the block 3. Now here it's very clear for the compiler or interpreter to know that this is a set of sequence of instruction it has to follow. And that block 1 has to be executed once and then 2 and then 3. Note that there are no conditions or no repetitions, just a simple set of program flow. Now let us consider why the different types of program flow are actually required. As I mentioned before, this is a simple flow. We have block 1, 2 and 3. Now consider this example where you want to execute this block 2 only on certain condition. Meaning that if only certain condition is succeeded, then you want to execute this block 2. Otherwise, the program has to execute only the block 3. How do you control this? Without these program flow constructs, then these kind of set of conditional statements are not possible. Now let's check one more condition. Like say we have the block 1 and you want to execute this block 2 n number of times. Say in this case, you want to execute this couple of times and then followed by the block 3. So when the actual program executes, it follows like block 1, then the block 2, then the block 2 executes again and then the block 3. Now how do you tell it to execute this block 2 say 2 times in this case? Now coming to the programming or the coding aspect, how do you define this set of program flow constructs? In any typical programming language, we have two broad categories. They are namely conditional statements and loops. In the next few set of videos, we will go deeper on these two topics. In the next video, let's see what are the first type, which is referred as the conditional statements. In this video, let us see what are conditional statements. Conditional statements instructs the compiler to perform different action based on a Boolean condition. In the previous video, we saw that the program flow constructs refers to how do you tell the compiler or the interpreter to execute specific set of instructions. These conditional statements are used to tell the compiler to execute specific action based on certain conditions. Again, let us take this set of examples. Now we again have the block 1, then the block 2 and block 3. Suppose you want to tell block 2 needs to be executed only if certain condition matches. If the condition doesn't match, then it has to execute block 3. How do you use it? So we use the conditional statements. So our achievement is something like this. So if only the certain specific statement is true, then we execute the block 2. Otherwise, we are going to execute block 3. So now how do you implement in a programming language these specific conditional statements? There are many ways we can implement these conditional statements in a typical programming language. Before we move further, I just want to make some points on these statements. The first is, these conditional statements are the most powerful language feature. Personally, I like these conditional statements a lot. The reason being, you can write even the entire function using only these conditional statements because they are very simple to use. I have seen that there are many code snippets or even the entire functions have been written only using these if conditions. So when you start working in a company, don't get surprised when you see various set of codes which have been written only using these if statements. It is possible to write even complex programs using just these conditional statements. Finally, these are also referred to as just conditions. Like you might be hearing like, okay, this is a condition statement or it's just conditions. So they refer to one and the same. Coming back to the different ways of achieving this conditional logic, we broadly have 4 different types of conditional statements. They are if else, nested if else, and finally switch case. Most of the programming languages supports these types of conditional statements. In the next few set of videos, let us cover these different types one after the other. In the next video, let's start with the first type, namely if statement. In this video, we will see the first type of conditional statement, namely if statement. If statement is a conditional statement for one-way selection. What it means is that we just have one type of selection methodology to execute one block. So when the program flow executes, it will check for a condition. If it satisfies, then it executes a block. Otherwise, it proceeds. So we literally have just one way of selecting the code snippet. Let us see the program flow in case of the if statement. We here have the if keyword followed by the condition. So what we want to achieve is if this condition executes and then if it is true, then execute this set of block. If suppose this condition is false, then you execute only this set of block. So this we want to achieve using say if statement. So the program flow is typically like this. So as you can see, if condition true, then it executes this block and then this continues with block 2. If suppose this condition is false, then this block gets skipped. It directly executes this block 2. This is the program flow of a typical if condition. Now let us look at the syntax of these if statements. As you can see below, the if statement syntax is quite simple. We have the if keyword followed by the actual condition, then the then keyword followed by the statements to execute. Finally, we end with end if. So what happens is if this condition is executed, if it is true, then these statements get executed. Otherwise, it comes to this next set of lines, which is over here. Let us see a couple of examples for these if statements. The first one is again our simple iPhone model usage. So we want to print the I've got iPhone 10 message only if our iPhone model is 10. In other cases, we don't print this. So what we do, if iPhone model equals 10. So in our case, this is the condition. If this condition satisfies, then we print these set of statements. Notice that in our example, we just have a single line, but in case of actual real world programming, you have many lines. So in our case, it's very simple. If iPhone model equals 10, then we print this. Then it ends, then it starts executing the next set of statements. Suppose if iPhone model is not 10, then what happens is this statement doesn't get printed. Since this is false, it directly comes over to the next line, which is print I will get executed anyways. Irrespective of whether this condition is satisfied or not, this statement will get executed because it is outside the if clause. Now let us check the second example where we try to use two of the conditions. So here we have the if keyword, we have the iPhone model equals 10 or iPhone model equals 11. So when the program executes, it will check for the phone model to be either 10 or 11. If either of these two conditions is true, then it means this entire statement is considered as true. Then it will print I got the latest iPhone. Suppose the iPhone model is neither 10 nor 11, then this entire statement evaluates to false. Then this statement gets skipped because it's false. Then whatever statement is below this, it gets continued execution. Note that the word if is a keyword. Hence, it cannot be used as a variable name. If you remember, keywords are the set of standard variables used by a programming language, and you cannot use them in any variable names or any other constructs. So in our case, if is a keyword, so you cannot use it as a variable name. In the next video, we will see the second type of conditional statement, namely if-else statements. Now let us check if-else statements. If-else statements are conditional statements for two-way selection. We saw in the previous video that if statement refers to a one-way selection. Now if-else refers to a two-way selection. Check out this block diagram. Let's see what happens in case of a program flow for if-else statements. Basically what we are trying to achieve is one block should get executed for when the condition gets succeeded, and the other set of blocks should get executed if that condition fails. That is the very purpose of these if-else statements. The program flow is quite simple. So we have a condition which is being checked. If this condition is true, then this block should get executed. If suppose this condition fails, we then want this block to be executed. This is just a simple program flow in case of if-else. So to repeat, if we have the condition which is being evaluated, if it succeeds, which is like true, then this block gets executed. Otherwise, if it is false, then this block gets executed. Then irrespective of whether this condition or this block is executed, it continues with execution of all further blocks. As you might have noticed, if either of these block gets executed, the other block doesn't get executed. That is, if this blocks get executed, then the control comes directly to here. In similar fashion, if block 2 gets executed, then it directly comes to here. There is no way that block 1 and block 2 get executed at the same time. That is a very fundamental concept of these if-else conditions. Coming to the syntax of these if-else statements, it is very similar to those of if statement, except for the addition of these else clause. In case of if condition, we saw that if followed by a condition, then we had a then keyword followed by a set of statements and then end if. The only difference with in if else is this addition of these else clause. So we tell that if this condition succeeds, then these statements, else, we have a keyword, then these set of statements. And finally, we end with end if. Irrespective of whether this statement executes or this executes, once it's over, the program will continue with any statements below this end if keyword. Let us go back to our iPhone model sample program. Now here, as you can see, we are trying to use the same concept, except that we are using it for if-else statements. We have again the if iPhone model equals 11, then we are printing the iPhone 11, else in all other cases where iPhone model is not equal to 11, then it prints I got an older iPhone. Now as you can see here, there is no way these two statements can execute at the same time. If iPhone model equals 11, then this statement executed. For any other cases, this statement gets executed. There is no way that both statements can execute. Now, irrespective of which statement gets executed, once it is completed, any statements below this if end if is going to be get executed. Another point I would like to make here is that just like if statements, in this case of conditions, we can have multiple conditions here. Like if iPhone model equals 11 or iPhone model equals 10, then you can say print I got iPhone 11 or 10. So basically this condition need not be a single condition, it can be a multiple. The entire statement should either evaluate to true or false. Accordingly, this set of statements is getting executed. As always, the else is a keyword in this case, so we cannot use it as a variable name. So in case of if else, both if as well as else is a keyword, so we cannot use them as variable names. In the next video, we will see nested if else statements. Basically, these are just a minor variation of the if or the if else statements which we have seen before. Now let us see the third type of conditional statements, namely nested if else statements. Nested if else statements are conditional statements for multiple way selection. We have seen before that if is a one-way selection, if else is a two-way selection. Now these nested if else are used for multiple way selection. It's a variant of those if and if else. We try to combine them to form a multiple way selection pattern. Let us have a look at the program flow in case of these nested if else statements. Now as you can see below, this looks very similar to the if else conditions which you have seen before. We have the if condition, then the block, then we have say else, then the different set of block gets executed. Now the only difference being we have multiple if else in between. So as you can see here, we have if, then we followed by another else if. So basically what happens is this condition is tried to get true. If it is true, then this block gets executed. Otherwise, it tries to come and execute the second condition. If this condition succeeds, then this block gets executed. Then if suppose we have multiple similar else if conditions, then all these conditions is trying to evaluate it. Whichever succeeds, that block gets executed, and then the program flow continues after these nested if else conditions. Remember that in case of even nested if else statements, only one block gets executed at a time. So if block 1 gets executed, then it immediately comes out of all this and the final statement gets executed from here. If this statement is not executed, if neither this, and suppose if this statement gets executed as a last resort, then the program execution continues after these if else conditions. Coming to the syntax of these nested if else statements, there are two ways you can achieve this. Before we see them, I want to make one point. As you can see in the syntax below, this might look a bit difficult or a bit complex to understand. If you feel it's getting difficult, just take your time and then try to understand what this statement does. Because I agree that these nested if else can become tricky and become complex over a period of time, but just spend some time, then you will be able to understand them. In the first syntax, we have multiple if conditions one after the other. So as you can see here, we have first if condition, then we have another if condition, then like that you can keep repeating n number of times. So this is the first way of achieving the nested if else. Basically, you have multiple if conditions one after the other. So in this first syntax, we have if condition 1, then these statements executed. Else, if this condition 2 succeeds, then this statement. Like this, you can have for n number of conditions, then ending with else. So as you can see here, we have multiple if conditions. That is the first syntax of these nested if else statements. As always, example is a lot better than the theoretical part. So now if you can see here, we are again using the iPhone model example. Now you see how clean it is now. We have iPhone model equals 10, then print 10. If the iPhone model equals 11, then print 11. Like you can keep repeating it. Like say if your iPhone model equals 8, then print 8. If iPhone model equals 7, you can print 7. You can keep going multiple if conditions. So as you can see, we are like stacking each if conditions one after the other. We are nesting one among the other. That's why it is called as say nested if else statements. So in our example, iPhone model is a variable name. It is being used and checked against different values. It executes one after the condition until the condition matches. Once the condition matches, then it will print the according statements. Then it will come back to the final end if. And whichever statement is below this is going to get executed. Now this is the second syntax of using these nested if else. Now as you can see here, we have a simple if else, like say if condition 1, then set of statements to execute, and then we have else, then set of statements to execute. Now how we come back to this nested type is we introduce another if else between these if statement. So we have if condition, then these set of statements get executed. While it executes this statement, we have another if statement or if else statement between this. And then we have the else clause for the other set of statements. I understand it's a bit difficult here, but just try to grasp the concept. Basically, we are nesting multiple if else conditions inside another if conditions. As always, these nesting can go any level of deeper. Like say you can have if condition, then another if else condition inside this, then you can have another if else condition inside this. There are basically no limit on that. This is the general syntax of these if else statements. Check out the second example for nested if else statements. For now, you just skip this block snippet. We'll come back to this shortly. So first we have the if model equals iPhone, then this block gets executed. Otherwise, this block gets executed. Now so far, this is a very simple if else condition, if else statements. So what basically we are going to do now is, if this statement gets executed, instead of a simple set of statements, we have another if condition here. So we are nesting one if inside another if statement. That's why we call it as nested if. Of course, you can have these if statements any level below. Like iPhone model equals 11, then instead of printing, you can even have other condition like if iPhone price equals 1000 or something like that. So the nesting of these if else statements is endless. A quick note on this nested if else statement is that don't make it too complicated. Don't try to have multiple nested if else statements just because the programming language allows it. You have to be careful with having the multiple levels of these if else statements. In the next video, we will see the final type of conditional statements, namely switch statements. This is basically a variation of these nested if else statements, but in a lot easier way to maintain as well as a better readability. Now let us see the final type of conditional statement, namely switch statements. Switch statements are conditional statements for multiple way selection. Again, the definition looks very similar to nested if else. In fact, these both are very close to each other except for the change in their representation or syntax. Let us check the program flow in case of these switch statements. As you can see below, it is a bit different from all those if else conditions. We have the switch keyword followed by a variable name. Then we have a case keyword followed by a value. Then we have these blocks. So as you can see, we have multiple blocks and finally a default block. What the flow actually tells is that we try to check the value of this variable and depending on the value, we try to execute a set of blocks. Now it is a bit different from the way we have been seeing for these nested if-else or if-else conditions. A very big advantage of this switch statement is that it is very readable. As you can see, it is very easy. You can see this is first block, this is second block, and this third block, and say final block. We saw that in case of nested if-else, it can really get complicated. But switch case statements are a bit easier to read and easier to maintain as well. So how the program flow is like that, a variable name is trying to execute. If this value gets satisfied, then this block gets executed, and then it comes to the next statement, which is after the switch statement. As always, these set of blocks gets skipped when one of the conditions succeeds. That is how the switch statements works. If you have understood the program flow of the switch statements, then the syntax becomes very obvious. So we have the switch keyword followed by the variable name. Then we have the case keywords followed by the actual value. Then we have the statements to execute. Now this can execute any number of times depending on the value which you want to check. So in this case, say value up to value 2 is being checked, and we have the default case. Now what is this default? What it means is that when you're checking for this variable name, if none of these cases get satisfied, then this statement gets executed. As you can relate, this is equivalent to the else clause in case of if-else statements. Now going back to our iPhone model examples, let's see how it is represented in case of switch statements. Here we have the iPhone model as a variable name. Then we have multiple case statements with the value we are checking. So in case of value 10, we print iPhone 10. In case of value 11, we print iPhone 11, and so on. Suppose if none of these conditions get satisfied, then we have the default clause which prints I've got an older iPhone. Now as you can see here, this is very similar to what we saw in case of nested if-else, except that it's a lot more easy to understand as well as a lot more easier to manage. Meaning that tomorrow if a new iPhone model gets released, then you just add one more case. Say case 12, print I got iPhone 12. Same way we have say 13, 14, 15 and so on. It's easy to maintain as well as it's easy to remember and easy to maintain at the same time. One important point before we move on to the next topic is that these switch statements are not supported by all the programming languages. So depending on the language which you use, the switch case statements may or may not be supported in that particular language. Thank you for watching this video. In fact, this video is part of the course Fundamentals of Programming Languages for Beginners. I had created this course so that it acts as a guide for you to learn the foundations of coding to start your programming career. This course contains various sections such as Introduction to the Programming Fundamentals, Understanding Variables, Operators, Conditional Statements, Loops, Functions, Comments, and Exceptions. Each of these sections comes with various lectures followed by the quiz and activities. These activities such as assignments as well as a quiz helps you to apply the learnings you had done so far. Overall, this course contains about 2 hours of videos along with the quiz and activities and various worksheets. If you are interested in this course, then just click on the link present in the description below. See you in the course video. Till then, bye.